Hi, we are back. You would notice that Shakodi stepped out. You know, he's got his activities to do as well. But we have been blessed with the addition of Joy-Ann Inniss. She is a teacher at St. Giles Primary School. But she's also the chairman of the Gender Affairs Committee of the NUPW. And she knows a lot about diversity as well, especially with respect to education. So she's really a great asset to join our conversation with us this morning. Welcome, Joy-Ann.
Thank you.
So hopefully you would have heard some of what has gone before about various aspects of diversity. We looked at diversity with the curriculum, the school population, the students themselves, and within each student. And I love the fact that you are the chair of the Gender Affairs Committee.
Yes.
I'd like to have your ideas on the aspect of diversity within education, especially within the workplace setting of education, when it comes to diversity.
Okay, when I'm looking at diversity, let's see if I can go a little bit back. You're looking at a multicultural dynamic, even within the workplace itself. So you have persons coming from various socioeconomic backgrounds. They're coming also from religion. They're also coming from educational backgrounds as well. And all of that plays into the workplace. If you as a manager is not cognizant of the different dynamics that can influence persons' behavior within the workplace, you run yourself in a little bit of trouble. That's where you would see us probably as trade unionists. Because then what has happened is that you have created, in some cases, a hostile environment. Because those cultures do play a part in relation to how best to move an organization forward. But you also need training. So in a lot of cases, we have found that managers are not necessarily skilled in the area, or they have a very tunnel vision. They have a certain objective, and this must be met regardless of understanding the individuals within the workplace and how those behaviors, how my environment can actually impact and enhance the working environment. Once you look to quell those cultures, those individual cultures, those individual behaviors, that is where you would have some conflict occurring. And it plays out also in your classroom environment. Understanding different children come with different behaviors, different backgrounds, different socioeconomic backgrounds. Some, at the end of the day, may have behavioral issues as well. If you don't understand what is going on with each individual child or each individual employee, there is where your conflict begins. So for diversity is understanding that each individual comes from a different background altogether, but must be embraced in order to enhance the environment.
So we're looking again at integration.
Yes.
As opposed to segregation.
Correct.
I
yes.
love it. I love
yes.
it. I love it. And there's also the aspect there of lifelong learning, because we're talking about educating the managers.
Correct.
To things like this. So
yes.
in Barbados, within education, whenever we talk about education, we're always thinking students in school, but we have to really take it to the full gamut. Students don't necessarily have to be in the school environment, and they're not necessarily under the age of 16. You will have a student who is a manager, and we've got to be able to stretch that whole aspect of lifelong learning in education up to that aspect and include them in this whole thing of diversity, and being aware of it, being able to know what it really is, because diversity may mean different things to different people, where diversity should mean different things to all people.
Yes.
Okay. And the practice of it, we mentioned tolerance before. We don't see a lot of tolerance in areas that we should, especially from the top down. Right? In many cases.
We are also going, because I heard when Akill, when he mentioned in relation to CARICOM, we have free movement of labor. And now with that, you're going to have persons with their own cultures coming into another environment, a new environment. The perception is that persons want to come and, and take over. That is not true. People are very fearful to leave home, to leave a secure environment, to come into an unknown environment. When they come into this environment, they have to learn new skills. They have to learn how to work out, how am I going to see as an individual within this group that seems not to accept me. So it has to be learned from both directions. One, there have to be an acceptance from one area, which means I have to train persons to accept diversity, that this person comes with new ideas, new views, new cultures, and therefore don't see it as something to react against, but to adopt. And not adopt meaning to quell yours, but see if there can be a merge of the two cultures together. Because when that happens, you realize then that the unity is even tighter. One area I didn't hear a lot of, and probably this is going to be very controversial, is in relation to religion. You have different types of religion, but yet our society takes dominance with one religion, and therefore every other thing is ostracized or measured against it.
Furthermore, within the education system is the expression of religion. Again, looking at various educational models, there's certain models which say, education is a private thing, and you do that in your own space. So, for example, as opposed to saying, let's have a word of prayer, you're going to have a moment of silence. And you think or reflect. But then there's some people that when something does happen, we have to pray about it. I am all for prayer. I pray every day. But sometimes when we look at the education settings that we're in, if we are going to have devotion, the morning prayers, every single day, what happens to that student who is of a different faith? What happens to that student who is of a different denomination within Christianity? And we're talking about Christianity. Okay? On Ash Wednesday, what happens to that student who is not going to be able to march up with their school to the church to get the ash put on their forehead? Will they be marked as absent if they don't go to school that day? Or when we're talking educational diversity, these are issues that can come out. Right?
Why not use as part of your system then? Have some of for even the Hindus, let them do one of what they do, their ritual, the Muslims, Buddha, and let the students themselves embrace. Because once you have that, a different type of learning goes on within even the students themselves and even the school body, because then it becomes more inclusive and therefore guides.
And we can't leave out those students who will tell you, I do not believe in any religion
yes.
or a supreme being. I am an atheist.
Okay? She was right when she said it's controversial.
Very, very controversial.
The thing about when you run a school, and especially obviously if it is private, because they're coming straight to the school, one of the questions that you get would be, what is the religious belief of the school? And I've had that question already, and they said the school does not have a religious belief. And you have students who have been, we've had a student Hindu, one was Muslim, and when a parent asks, and they're of the same faith-based organization that I am, and I said, well, I think that it is better to educate the children on the various opinions, views of spirituality, religion, if you believe or don't believe, because these are people that they have to work with 10 years from now. So if they develop this idea that, this is what I think, and it's all about what I think, and I don't agree with them, they're going to have, and it goes back to what she said, which I agree with, you will have that difference of opinion clashing, instead of you trying to understand where the other person is coming from. Not that you're trying to inform them, or people use the word convert very strongly. But I think it comes from an information space where 10 years ago, religious education was just the doctrine of Christianity. Whereas if you're teaching religious education, which is something we said that you should be teaching all or the vast
So there's a
majority.
knowledge.
Yeah, so that they know. I would rather somebody know. It is when you don't know that you act out of ignorance instead of being informed.
And that's what builds intolerance.
So I can speak a little bit about the religious differences in school, in the sense that yes, they are children of different faiths, and if they indicate there is no pressure for the child to participate in an activity that they and their families are not, in agreement with, but that child is given, a space that they can quietly reflect, and it is not seen in any negative way. You're still one of us. You're still a part of our school and a part of, who we are. And I believe that diversity does create for a stronger bond of unity. I feel more of a Caribbean person when I go to New York and I meet my friend from Antigua,
Yes.
I meet my friend from Trinidad, and they're like, sister, when you get back home, it's like, okay, we're Bajans, and
Yes.
they're Trinidadians, and they're Antiguans. But when we are in a different space, you have that unity and that bond, like we're one from the Caribbean,
Yes.
and this is who we are, and we are together,
Yes.
If we can just wrap our minds around that and understand the power in unity, then I believe that we'll be well on our way to educating each other in this way.
A lot of times when we are in education situations, the premise is that we want to help. But it is very difficult to truly, genuinely help someone unless you know what motivates them, what drives them, who they really are. And lots of the time what we do see is who we want to see as opposed to who is actually there. And we use a lot of the diverse natures and backgrounds to explain why they're not who we want. And I think what you said was very, very important about that unity, feeling a oneness with someone. Even if the oneness is simply within the relationship of helping and receiving help. Learning a particular skill, understanding a particular concept, understanding that though we may come from different backgrounds, we are joined together in this place because we are here and we're moving forward.
But that too will be guided by whoever I say in the classroom setting. The teacher must also understand diversity and accept diversity. And therefore, that is not necessarily a skill that you have that's innate. Some persons really have to learn that particular skill or go through an education process in recognizing different diverse groups and how best to deal with them. You will also learn on the job. You see it with your children coming, the ones that you will see coming in now regionally, and the language bar that exists between you and the student. So you're saying something, and the child really and truly can't understand what you're saying because the two languages are different. And therefore, you would then say that the child has a learning deficit or the child is underperforming. But all happen is that you have a gap. You may have, for some teachers I've seen, they actually try to copy the native, like the first language of the child, so that then there's a bridge occurring. Children themselves teach. Children, peers teach each other as well. So sometimes they pick up the lingo. But my thing is this: understanding each individual child. Diversity deals not only with groups, understanding the group, but the individual. Because that same child may also exhibit then emotional and behavior disorder. And you cannot figure out why this child seems to have so much pushback coming at you, and therefore there is a gap between you and the child. In cases like that, you the teacher must be educated enough, trained enough to know when to pull back, when to recognize what maybe, I had heard you made a statement, the trigger in that particular case, and then how best to deal with it. So the once then you get that child understanding who that child is and where they're coming from, you recognize then that within the classroom environment, it is very, very amicable. Once you get them, the same thing happens within the workplace. The pushback comes when there's an unknown, when there's a prejudice, when there's a discrimination based on either the sex, based on the age too, based on even your academic achievements. All that happens. Once there's an understanding and an acceptance that these persons are only adding to and not taken away from you, then you will have a more holistic environment to work with.
Let's look at that age, because again, we're looking at education.
I was thinking the same thing.
We're looking at education. And this could possibly be another controversial issue, because, you know, we have this whole thing, we don't want to leave a child behind educationally. So sometimes a situation will occur where if the child does not reach certain competencies by the end of the year, they have to repeat. And there's some schools of thought there saying that as long as the child's a certain age, let them go up. But then the whole thing is, if they don't know, how can they go up and actually perform? How do you feel about, you know, children who are approximately a year, maybe a year and a bit older in average age in the class? And how do you think that form of diversity can impact on that student?
Well, that is a really good question, and it will be very controversial. Okay, so you have two ends of it, and you have the part where students may be struggling, and it always depends on the output. You know, I always ask the question: what is the purpose of education? Is education to get this child to score 100? That can't be the goal. The goal of educating or learning, because we say the word education, we always refer to academia, but you know, learning is learning, right? That's what we try to say to students and parents. So you have students who may be struggling, who may have to repeat. Then you also have students who are bored in the same age level because they've mastered the work, but there's nothing else for them to do. And sometimes it is unfortunate because society places so much pressure on teachers to deliver, and they make the expectation that because you're a teacher, you can get this child, that child, this child, this child. And I'm not saying that that is not an overall objective, but sometimes you have to look at class sizes. Are the teachers being supported? Or do they have the resources required to manage 30 plus students in the class? And they're increasing every year. Teachers have to deal with more social issues, more emotional issues. So remember, they had a discussion for, I'm pretty sure, yes, it was principal some time ago, and I went, and obviously, you know, being the youngest principal, the first thing you're going to get is, Ifill. And when I speak, I give my views and I back them up with stuff, and I don't think what somebody else has to say is not of validity, but you get things like, look, man, if you're trying to learn, let them repeat the class. Or you would get in the private school space, what's happening a lot is that when a child is smart in class 3, they let them do the 11 plus exam early so that we can say they did it early. They get to school and then they struggle to manage with the social demands of being a year there, right? But no one is looking at it. So I don't think there's a one approach. A lot of it depends on what the individual focus of the school and the teacher, the parents and the student too, because like Shakoti said earlier, you know, he felt like for a farm, he was like, you know, why am I here? And education should do that. You're not going to, sometimes you will not get through to everyone, despite your best efforts. That should be the goal. But I think one way they can look at it too is addressing to see if it is realistic. If a teacher is teaching a class of 30-something students, what is the output of these students? And I think the ministry started to do that years ago with the criterion reference test to see where a child should be in Infants B or where a child should be there, you know. But it is, you know, and I'm saying it because, you know, even at my school, we we don't have 30-something students, okay? And it is hard for a teacher to teach 30 students. And it isn't even if the teacher is good or bad, because you get people saying, but that teacher ain't good and that teacher bad. When you analyze it, it really has nothing to do with the teacher. It has to do with the fact that when the student goes home, the parent isn't reinforcing any of the work that the teacher gave the student to do.
Right.
And the student themselves feel defeated because they're like, you know what? This education thing ain't for me. I done with that. So let me go and do something else.
And essentially, you're at a primary school.
But we're primary and secondary.
Primary and secondary. Do you see the same issue at the secondary level?
Oh, it is worse. We fool ourselves believing that the students are getting smarter. They're not. The students every year, they're reliant more on technology to solve problems than they are using the brain.
Right.
And part of it has to do with how they learn, and even learning. You know, we're still doing chalk and talk. We're still doing, you know, even if you use a mark on a board, it's the same thing as 40 years ago. Whereas students with iPads or technology, and you use it as a tool. It's like a hammer. The hammer is not the only thing that can knock in a nail. You can use a rock, you can use a piece of wood. It's how you use the tool to get the job done.
You can even use 2 other nails.
Yeah, but right, you could do that. Yeah, that can work.
Yes.
I don't necessarily, when he made a comment about the students aren't getting smarter, I didn't necessarily agree with that. Their way of learning is completely different to our way of learning. And therefore, there is a challenge. We don't transition. We have not upgraded ourselves to new technology. Students have mastered it, can take little babies, take a cell, and they can go through, and you might see things you shouldn't see. But because they know what to do, and you're unaware of it. So you're not on top of it. So for us, I don't think we have recognized that and changed within the classroom environment to embrace that type of learning at all. So I think sometimes we need to stay on top of it. That's why for teachers, your education training is crucial. And not just education training, you're just going, but learn. That's craziness.
Right.
Make sure there are courses that you also have online that you can look and see, okay, where they're at, where they're taking us. Yes, you may not we rely on the Ministry of Education to give us some of those resources, but some of those resources you can get on your own. Not that I'm putting a plug for the Ministry of Education. I'm just saying that for you, understanding the type of child that you have in a classroom, then you can cater to that particular child, because that child will also help another child that's in the classroom who are having challenges as well. Right.
Yes.
Yeah. I just wanted to go back about the when you were talking about the children repeating a year and if it would be beneficial to them. This is something that I have thought about and have had some experience with as well. There are a couple of factors that need to go into considering whether this child is going to benefit from this repeating of a year or whatever. It has to do with the home and the school and the support that the child has. Akill was talking earlier about having a child do the common entrance, go ahead of their year. And when they get into the secondary situation, they are like a fish out of water, because emotionally they are not ready to deal with the shock and awe of the secondary situation. It does have to do with the support system that is put in place by the school, and also the support system that the child has in the home and in the persons who they surround, their network. That is where we find that children who have that support from the school, from the home, and from their community, that they're able to thrive in various situations, even if it has to do with repeating or going into secondary school early, because they have the support. It's imperative that we as educators also let parents and all who are involved know that it is not just, yes, we let them go on earlier, but that continued support is integral, and it is crucial for their, proper development and for how they will be able to interact with others socially and emotionally as well. I don't think sometimes we take that into consideration. We kind of, they're so smart, just dump them in and they'll swim. But then there is a lot of emotional stuff and because of where they are on the developmental level, because if you're thinking about a child developmentally, you know that certain things happen at certain times, there's maturation and all of that. So we have to look at the child holistically,
Right.
because education is, like we've been saying, it's not just about the book. It's a holistic thing.
And again, looking at that simple word diversity in support. A lot of people, when they're talking about backgrounds and the whole environment from home, they tend to leave out that word support, especially when they believe that a student or a child is doing well. Sometimes the child that is doing well is super organized because they have to be. Because at home they have to take care of themselves as well as. Okay? And we don't give much credence to that aspect, because as long as you've got your parent, or your 2 parents, or your 2.5 parents, because you got your grandparents there as well, you have support. But sometimes having those people and having that larger family or the smaller family means that you are the one giving the support. All right? So we've also got to include that in the whole diversity pie as well. I remember there were some students I've worked with previously, not just in Barbados. At home, they had, everybody would think that they had the most of everything, the best of everything. But mother was always overseas and father was an alcoholic. They had a lot of money. But when that child got home, that child had to run the house. So they did not get the support that everybody assumed, but you would never know it, because when the child left the house to go to school, they were always super organized. That was a great way for them to keep the secret. But when then dealing with drug-related classes, you had to be aware that these type of children were also in there too, because you would have people saying that, the children that come from homes where the parents are, alcoholic or drug addicts are going to be showing these signs. No, not in certain cases, all right? And sometimes it's so important to have a better understanding of who your child is when you're even delivering the education. Talking about the different cultures, talking about the different ethnic groups. All of us here are mixed up. All of us are mixed up. Okay, I can trace, my grandfather looks Chinese. Okay, and I'm sure that if you look far enough back in your history, your genes, and your family tree, some nuts going to fall out that don't look like peanuts. That might be almonds, walnuts, all kind of nuts. But the fact of the matter is we're all mixed up. And yet, too often, sometimes the delivery of education, especially in our part of the world, tends to put a lot of stress on all the bad things that Black people went through. How the colonizers, And yes, there is a historical bent to it, but you also have to realize that because of that whole situation, all of us have colonizers inside of us. All of us have Black inside of us. So even that diverse aspect has to be brought up. Look at somebody like Tiger Woods. They say, oh, he's a Black golfer. Yeah, but, his mother is Korean, I do believe. And he embraces that side of his culture as well. So the cultural diversity, in a lot of people, they say maybe don't always see the internal challenges. Sometimes their cultural diversity is not worn on the skin. And we have to be cognizant of that too, especially with the education being delivered here. I see it. I feel looking at me.
I was thinking, okay, when people talk about tourism, they talk about the tourism product.
Yes.
And they talk about manufacturing, they talk about the manufacturing product. What's the product of education in Barbados? When you look at the goals and some of the things, and, when I've been asked, I've said that part of why I wanted to do a school had nothing to do with the other schools. It had nothing to do with that. It was pretty much what I thought we could do in society without, having to go X place. I mean, you look at some of the challenges that schools across the world, Barbados, they're having. Part of it, again, was a fusion of what both of you said, in terms of the parents living vicariously through the children. But then you said something about the history. I remember what Mother was talking about in terms of understanding where you came from. Now, most of when I was going to school, for example, a student who was struggling with something, the emotional and social aspect of a child's development has changed a lot in 10 to 15 years, especially from my perspective as it relates to boys, to males. And you're talking about diversity there too. You've had research done by UB that has spoke about the amount of graduates are female and the girls are performing better than the boys, and I think that at some point in time we have to look at that conversation, because then once you do that, you're then saying about the boys and then you're doing this girl-boy thing, and to me it is a child. The child is what you should be looking at. So when you're looking at the product, what is the education product? You would hear that Barbados has a very large human resource pool. Okay? We have a large base, but the country is X size, there are X amount of people, and there are X amount of opportunities. So unless the opportunities are created, and to me, that is what I believe the purpose of education should be, because you have to teach children, one, you have to teach them critical thinking more often than before. You have to teach them how to be more tolerant and be more diverse, and then you also have to teach them how to think. And that was the point I was making about the students being not as smart as they were before, because her point, I take the point, right? But the issue is that they have access to the information more,
Right.
and they're easier. They have it at the disposal. So the information, instead of searching through a dictionary, a child can find the word. But the process of searching through the dictionary and going to the public library requires research skills that a lot of students are lacking, because they can go to YouTube and pull up the clip and the information is done for them and they just summarize it. So they're not thinking as much as they would have had they not had the devices.
Yes.
That's kind of,
Again, I would probably beg to differ, because you go to university and I go into the library, I go through the database, pull up put in a keyword, pull out, So my thing, and that's probably going to lead us in another direction and in more trouble, the feminization of this teaching profession. That's going to open a whole can of worms. So I am not even going to go there.
Well, we definitely have to have another follow-up to this. Yes.
But in relation to diversity, is recognizing that each individual has a purpose, and each individual also comes with its own individuality, own culture, own personal dynamics, and different triggers as well. And once you recognize that within any environment, then you have to help them to mold, to understand other persons, to be tolerant of it, not to use prejudice or discrimination, because that's where the challenge comes, but to be embracive and knowing that it's going to enhance the environment. So if you're willing to understand and recognize, even as managers, teachers, principals, that your group is diverse, and once you're willing to accept that, then you would then create an environment where all of that energy can begin to play together and become one and whole.
Thank you so much. We only have, I think, about a minute left.
Happening to us.
It's happening to us all the time. Imelda, in a few seconds, give us your final thoughts on diversity in education.
I think just considering diversity in education is a lifelong process.
Yes.
And if there is one thing that I've taken away from this discussion, is that we haven't even begun to scratch the surface as yet. But it is a relevant part of our experience as educators, and it is important for us to acknowledge and embrace diversity in the classroom and in our society as a whole. And we didn't even get the chance to talk about education and the Barbadian society and our constructs and our
Yes.
way of thinking and our mindset and our history, where that comes from. But
We have to start somewhere.
We have to start
At least
somewhere.
the conversation has started.
has started.
Yes.
Yes.
You just had right? But do you want another 10 seconds to just round off? And
No,
then I'll come to
at the end of the day, we have to look at our modality, how we teach. We have to, the individual himself, the manager himself, have to change the attitude as well and be models
Yes.
for the whole concept of diversity and inclusion. And if you can start that, and then once you've done that, be embracive of new ideas, new cultures, then you would have a more, amicable working environment.
Great, thank you.
You tell your students don't repeat what the other students said, but it's literally the same thing, of inclusion and integration, and it will chart the way forward. Period. So that we have a more tolerant, understanding society of where we should go.
The three of you so much, and also thank you to Shakoti, who was with us earlier. Shakoti, the conversation has just started. Let's continue to discuss it. Let's continue to look at various ways that we can embrace our diversity, the way we deliver our programs, the programs we offer, the students, teachers, and the parents that we work with. We need to, as was said earlier, we should be all trying to go to the same place, right, as one. Those of us who can get there faster, let's bring along the others who need the help. My name is Donna Tull Cox, and it was a pleasure being here with you today, and I want to see you guys again soon as we discuss diversity in education in Barbados.